The coffee was cold again. Commander Jake Harrison pushed the mug away and rubbed his tired eyes. He had been staring at the computer screens for 6 hours straight, watching the same boring data streams from Earth below. Nothing ever changed. Up here on Aurora 7, the space station that orbited Earth like a lonely metal moon. "Jake, you need to see this." Dr. Lisa Martinez burst into the control room, her dark hair messy from running her hands through it. She was the station's alien life expert, though she had never found any aliens to study. Until now. "What is it?" "Lisa?" Jake asked, not looking away from his screens. "Look at this signal pattern." Lisa plugged her tablet into the main display. Strange lines and dots filled the screen, pulsing in colors Jake had never seen before. "This isn't from any satellite we know about." Jake sat up straight. After 3 years of watching empty space, something was finally happening. "Where is it coming from?" "That's the crazy part. It's coming from everywhere. Above us, below us, all around Earth. Like we're surrounded. Far below them on Earth, Danny Sullivan wiped sweat from his forehead and looked at his watch. 5 o'clock. Time to go home after another long day building houses. His back hurt, his hands were covered in cuts, and his paycheck barely covered his rent. But as he walked to his truck, he saw Mrs. Garcia struggling with her grocery bags at the bottom of the apartment stairs. Danny was tired. His feet hurt. He wanted nothing more than to go home and sleep. But Mrs. Garcia was 80 years old and lived on the 3rd floor. "Let me help you with those," Danny said, taking the heavy bags from her hands. "Oh, you're such a good boy, Danny," Mrs. Garcia smiled. "But you've been working all day." "It's okay. I'm not that tired." Danny lied. He was exhausted, but he couldn't let an old lady carry heavy bags up 3 flights of stairs, 20 miles above Earth's surface inside a massive ship that humans couldn't see. Scholar Prime Veltar watched this interaction with growing confusion. The ship was called Contemplation of Truth, and it was bigger than most human cities. Veltar had been studying different worlds for over 200 years, and he had never seen anything like this. Scholar Prime. His assistant Kethwy approached, carefully. "The human subject designated D47 is exhibiting the anomaly again." Veltar looked at the screen showing Danny carrying groceries up the stairs. The old human female was not related to the young human male. There was no mating involved. The male gained nothing from this action. In fact, it cost him energy and time. "Run the analysis again," Veltar ordered. "I have run it 47 times, Scholar Prime. The result is always the same. The human male performs this action with no benefit to himself." This made no sense. Veltar's people, the Zephyrians, had studied thousands of planets with intelligent life. Every species followed the same basic rules. Survive, reproduce, protect your family. Everything else was secondary. But these humans kept breaking the rules. Back on Earth, Amy Peterson was supposed to leave school at 3:30. It was now 6 o'clock, and she was still in her classroom with Tommy, a student who couldn't read very well. Amy had her own children at home. She had bills to pay, and dinner to cook. But Tommy needed help, and his parents worked 2 jobs and couldn't afford a tutor. "Try this word again, Tommy," Amy said patiently. C8. Cat. Tommy's face lit up. "That's right. You're getting so much better." Amy wouldn't get paid extra for this. The school didn't require her to stay late. She did it because Tommy needed help, and she was the only one who could give it. In the ambulance racing through the city streets, Kevin Brooks was starting his 2nd shift of the day. He had already worked 12 hours, but when the call came in about a car accident with children involved, he couldn't say no. His wife would be angry. His kids would be asleep before he got home. Again. But somewhere in the twisted metal of that car, people needed help. That was enough. High above, Veltar studied these 3 humans and thousands more like them. His computers ran countless calculations trying to find the hidden reason for their behavior. There had to be a reason. Every species had motivations that made sense. "Perhaps they expect rewards in an afterlife," suggested Kethwy. "Some do, some don't. Their religious beliefs vary greatly, but the behavior remains constant. Maybe their leaders command this behavior." "No, We detect no control systems. They choose these actions freely. Veltar's 3 hearts were beating faster than usual. In all his years of study, he had never encountered a species that regularly acted against its own interests. It was impossible. Evolution didn't work that way. The Zephyrian Empire was the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. Their ships could destroy planets. Their weapons could tear holes in space itself. They had planned to come to Earth, study the humans briefly, then take control of their world. It should have been simple, but now watching these impossible creatures, Veltar felt something he had never experienced before. Doubt. Back on Aurora 7, Lisa Martinez was trying to decode more of the strange signals. Jake, I think someone is watching us. These patterns, they're too organized to be natural. Watching us from where? Jake asked. I don't know, but whoever they are, they're good at hiding. Lisa didn't know that at that very moment Veltar was watching her too. The alien scholar saw her working late into the night, trying to protect her species from a threat she couldn't even see clearly. She gained nothing from this work except tired eyes and cold coffee, yet she continued. Danny Sullivan finally made it home to his small apartment. He heated up a frozen dinner and sat in his old chair, too tired to even turn on the television. He didn't think about Mrs. Garcia's grateful smile, or how much his back hurt from carrying her groceries. He just did what needed to be done, the same way he did every day. Amy Peterson tucked her own children into bed, apologizing for being late, again. She didn't mention Tommy or how proud she was when he finally read that difficult sentence. She just kissed her kids goodnight and promised to make them pancakes in the morning. Kevin Brooks crawled into bed next to his sleeping wife, careful not to wake her. He didn't think about the family he had saved or the lives he had touched. Tomorrow there would be more calls, more people who needed help. Above them all, Veltar stared at his screens in the darkness of space, trying to understand a species that made no sense. The invasion fleet was still months away, but already he wondered if the Zephyrians were making a terrible mistake. These humans were either the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy, or the most precious. He was beginning to suspect it might be both. Dr. Lisa Martinez hadn't slept in 36 hours. Her eyes were red and her hands shook slightly as she poured her 7th cup of coffee. The alien signals were getting stronger every day, but nobody on Earth wanted to listen. They think we're crazy, she said to Commander Jake Harrison, who looked just as tired as she felt. The Pentagon said they'll look into it. Jake replied with a bitter laugh. General Cole promised to send someone next month. Next month. These signals are everywhere, Lisa. Whatever is out there, it's studying us right now. Lisa rubbed her forehead. She had sent reports to every government agency she could think of. The responses were always the same. Thank you for your concern. We will investigate when resources allow. Resources. As if the possible existence of alien life wasn't the most important resource of all. But while Earth's leaders ignored the warning signs, the Watchers above continued their impossible task of understanding humanity. Veltar had expanded his research team. 50 of the Empire's best minds now worked around the clock, studying human behavior patterns. They focused on specific subjects, hoping to find some logic in the chaos. Show me subject R23 again, Veltar ordered. The screen displayed Rachel Davis, a nurse at Chicago General Hospital. She had been working for 16 hours straight. Her shift had ended at 7 in the morning, but 3 more patients had arrived with critical injuries from a highway accident. The other nurses were exhausted too, but Rachel stayed. Her body shows signs of severe fatigue, reported Kethwy. Her stress hormones are at dangerous levels. She should rest or risk collapse. Yet she continues, Veltar observed. On screen, Rachel gently cleaned a patient's wounds. The man was unconscious and couldn't thank her. His insurance wouldn't pay extra for Rachel's care. The hospital wouldn't give her a bonus for staying late. She gained nothing from this action except more exhaustion. Perhaps she fears punishment for leaving, suggested another researcher. Negative. Hospital policy allows her to leave after her shift. She chooses to stay. The researchers fell silent. In Zephyrian society, medical care was efficient but limited. Doctors treated patients exactly as required, no more and no less. Extra care wasted resources and served no logical purpose. But Rachel Davis was now cleaning behind the patient's ears, a task that wasn't medically necessary. She hummed softly as she worked, and somehow her presence seemed to calm the other patients in the room. "Monitor subject F-31, Veltar commanded. The screen switched to show Tony Garcia, a firefighter in Los Angeles. He had just finished battling a warehouse fire for 8 hours. His crew was loading equipment back onto their truck, ready to return to the station. But Tony heard something that made him stop, crying. Faint but desperate. "There's something in there," Tony said to his captain. "The building's been evacuated, everyone's out," Captain Rodriguez replied. But Tony walked back toward the smoking building anyway. The walls were unstable. The air was toxic. Going back inside violated every safety protocol they had. "Tony, get back here!" the captain shouted. Tony ignored him. He disappeared into the smoke and wreckage. Watching from space, Veltar's researchers ran quick calculations. The probability of human survival in that environment is less than 40%. The firefighter is risking death for unknown reasons. 5 minutes later, Tony emerged carrying a small cat. The animal was barely alive, covered in soot and ash. Tony immediately began giving it oxygen from his own mask. He risked his life for a non-human creature that serves no practical purpose, one researcher said in amazement. "Run psychological profile analysis," Veltar ordered. Analysis complete. Subject shows no signs of mental illness, drug influence, or coercion. He appears to have made this choice freely. Veltar's equivalent of a headache was getting worse. Every human they studied showed the same impossible pattern. They regularly risked their own safety, comfort, and resources for others with no logical benefit. The screen changed to show Sam Mitchell, an old soldier who lived alone in a small apartment in Detroit. Sam's left leg didn't work properly anymore, damaged by a bomb in some long-ago war. He survived on disability payments that barely covered his rent and food. But every Tuesday, Sam used his grocery money to buy sandwiches for the homeless veterans who lived under the highway bridge. He would sit with them for hours, sharing stories and making sure they weren't alone. Subject S-19 consistently gives away resources he needs for survival, reported Kethwy. His own nutritional intake is below recommended levels. "Why does he do this?" Veltar asked, though he knew no one could answer. On screen, Sam was talking to a younger veteran named Pete, who had lost both arms in combat. Pete was crying as he told Sam about his nightmares. Sam listened patiently, occasionally, placing his hand on Pete's shoulder. "I know how it feels, brother," Sam said quietly. "But you're not alone. We're all here. We take care of each other." The alien researchers watched in silence. In their culture, damaged individuals were provided with basic care but were not expected to contribute to society. The idea of broken creatures caring for other broken creatures was incomprehensible. Yet here was Sam Mitchell, poor and disabled, giving away his last dollars to help people who could never repay him. "Scholar Prime," Kethwy said slowly, "I'm beginning to think we misunderstood the nature of intelligence." "Explain." "We have always measured intelligence by technological advancement, resource management, and survival efficiency. But these humans, they seem to operate by completely different principles." Veltar stared at the screens showing hundreds of similar scenes across Earth. A teacher buying school supplies with her own money. A construction worker helping accident victims even though he was late for work. A grandmother walking 2 miles in the rain to take soup to her sick neighbor. "Run the deep behavior analysis on the entire data set," Veltar ordered. The computers worked for 6 hours. When the results appeared, the research chamber fell silent. "Impossible," whispered one scientist. "Check the calculations," ordered another, but the numbers were correct. According to their analysis, humans spent an average of 37% of their time and resources on activities that provided no direct benefit to themselves. Some individuals scored as high as 80%. No known species could survive with such inefficient behavior patterns. Yet humanity was not only surviving, but thriving. "Perhaps," Kethwy suggested carefully, We need to consider that we don't understand what survival means. Back on Aurora 7, Lisa Martinez was staring at a new set of signal intercepts when something made her heart skip. The patterns had changed. Instead of just observing, the aliens seemed to be analyzing, running some kind of tests on the data they collected. "Jake," she called urgently, "I think they're getting ready for something." "What kind of something?" Lisa enhanced the display, showing wave patterns that pulsed like a heartbeat. "I don't know, but whatever they're planning it soon." She was right. At that very moment, Veltar was preparing his report for the High Council. The invasion fleet was still approaching, but now he wasn't sure an invasion was the right word anymore. How do you conquer a species that might be more advanced than you in ways you don't understand? How do you defeat an enemy that defeats itself, daily through impossible kindness, and most frightening of all? What if these humans weren't the ones being tested? What if the test was meant for the Zephyrians? General Patricia Cole slammed her fist on the conference table so hard that coffee spilled everywhere. "You mean to tell me that we've had evidence of alien surveillance for 2 months, and nobody thought to inform the Joint Chiefs?" Dr. Lisa Martinez shifted uncomfortably in her chair. The Pentagon conference room was full of people in military uniforms, all staring at her like she had personally invited the aliens to Earth. "We tried to report it through normal channels," Lisa explained for the 4th time. "Every agency said they would look into it when they had time." "Well, we have time now," General Cole snapped. "These signal patterns you've detected, how many ships are we talking about?" Commander Jake Harrison cleared his throat. "Based on the signal strength and distribution, we estimate at least 50 vessels, possibly more." The room fell silent. 50 alien ships surrounding Earth was not good news. "What are their intentions?" asked Admiral Brooks. "We don't know," Lisa admitted. "They seem to be observing us, but we can't decode their communications." What Lisa didn't know was that at that exact moment, 23,000 miles above her head, Veltar was having his own crisis meeting. The High Council chamber aboard the mothership was enormous. 12 of the Empire's greatest minds sat in a circle, their scaled faces reflecting the blue glow of holographic displays. They had been arguing for 6 hours. "The data makes no sense," Scholar Yethron was saying. "These humans violate every principle of evolutionary psychology we know." "Perhaps our understanding is flawed," suggested Kethwy, earning sharp looks from the senior scholars. "Our understanding has been tested on 2,000 different worlds," snapped Admiral Morthak. "Every species follows the same basic patterns. Survival first, family second, everything else third. These humans are either hiding their true nature, or—" He paused. "Or what?" asked Veltar. "Or they're not a natural species." This possibility had been discussed before, but never seriously. The idea that humans might be artificially created or guided by some higher intelligence was almost too strange to consider. Then the earthquake happened. It struck Southeast Asia at 3:17 in the morning local time, magnitude 8.9. Buildings collapsed across 3 countries. Millions of people were trapped, injured, or homeless. The death toll began climbing immediately, but what happened next changed everything for both species. Within 2 hours, before the dust had even settled, offers of help began pouring in from around the world. Countries that had been enemies the day before sent rescue teams together. Rich nations and poor nations alike pledged whatever resources they could spare. Veltar watched in amazement as the human response unfolded. Transport planes loaded with medical supplies took off from dozens of airports. Rescue teams with search dogs and heavy equipment rushed toward the disaster zone. Ordinary citizens donated money they could barely afford to lose. "Monitor all global communications," Veltar ordered. "I want to see everything." The results were staggering. In Japan, an elderly couple gave their entire retirement savings to earthquake relief. In Brazil, children sold their toys and bicycles to raise money for victims they would never meet. In Canada, a group of doctors closed their practices and flew to the disaster zone at their own expense. But the moment that broke Veltar's understanding of reality came from a small hospital in Ohio. Jennifer Walsh was 23 years old and worked 2 jobs to support her sick mother. She cleaned offices at night and served food at a restaurant during the day. She made barely enough money to pay rent and buy groceries. Jennifer's boss at the restaurant, Mr. Peterson, had been planning to fire her. She was often tired from working 2 jobs, and sometimes she made small mistakes with orders. Mr. Peterson thought she was lazy and irresponsible. But when Mr. Peterson's 5-year-old daughter Emma was diagnosed with kidney failure, everything changed. Emma needed a transplant immediately. The waiting list was too long. Mr. Peterson was not a match. His wife was not a match. None of their family members could donate. Then Jennifer Walsh, the employee he had planned to fire, got tested. She was a perfect match. "I want to do it," Jennifer told the doctors. "You understand this is major surgery?" the doctor explained. "There are risks. You'll need weeks to recover. Your insurance might not cover everything." "I understand," Jennifer said quietly. "But she's just a little girl." Veltar replayed this conversation 17 times. His computers analyzed every word, every gesture, every biometric reading they could detect. The conclusion was always the same. Jennifer Walsh was genuinely willing to undergo dangerous surgery to save the child of a man who didn't even like her. "Run full psychological analysis," Veltar ordered. "Analysis complete. Subject shows no signs of mental illness, drug influence, or external coercion. Brain chemistry indicates genuine compassion and determination." "But why?" Veltar asked the empty air. "What does she gain?" The answer was, nothing. Jennifer would miss weeks of work, losing money she desperately needed. The surgery would leave her with permanent scars and lifelong restrictions. Her boss wouldn't suddenly become kind to her. She would gain nothing except the knowledge that a little girl would live. And for Jennifer Walsh, that was enough. The surgery was successful. Emma received Jennifer's kidney and began recovering immediately. When Jennifer woke up from the operation, still dizzy from medication, the first thing she asked was, "Is Emma okay?" Not, "How am I?" Not, "When can I go home?" Just concern for a child who wasn't even related to her. This single act pushed Kethwy to voice the theory that would change 2 civilizations. "Scholar Prime," Kethwy said carefully, "I believe we need to consider the divine hypothesis." The research chamber fell silent. The divine hypothesis was theoretical, something they discussed in advanced philosophy classes but never seriously considered. "Explain," Veltar said. "Every species we've studied operates according to evolutionary principles. They act primarily for their own survival and reproduction. But these humans regularly choose other beings' welfare over their own lives. This suggests they've transcended normal evolutionary psychology." "You're suggesting they've achieved spiritual evolution?" "I'm suggesting they might be guided by something beyond our understanding. Something that allows them to act against their own survival instincts for the benefit of others." The word divine was rarely used in Zephyrian culture. Their society was based on logic, efficiency, and technological advancement. The idea that a species could be guided by spiritual forces seemed primitive, but they couldn't explain human behavior any other way. "If this hypothesis is correct," Admiral Morthak said slowly, "then we may have made a grave error." "What kind of error?" asked Veltar. "The kind where we plan to conquer a species that might be sacred." Back on Earth, Jennifer Walsh was learning to walk again. The surgery had been more difficult than expected, and her recovery was slow. But every day, she asked about Emma. Every day she smiled when told the little girl was getting stronger. Mr. Peterson visited Jennifer in the hospital. He had been expecting her to ask for a promotion, a raise, or at least job security. Instead, she asked if Emma could visit when she was feeling better. "I'd like to see her play," Jennifer said. "I bet she has a beautiful laugh." Mr. Peterson left the hospital that day a changed man. He had spent his whole life believing that people were fundamentally selfish. Jennifer Walsh had proved him wrong. High above Earth, Veltar stared at the data streams showing millions of similar acts happening every day. Teachers spending their own money on students. Doctors treating patients who couldn't pay. Neighbors helping neighbors. Strangers helping strangers. It was impossible. It was illogical. It violated everything they knew about intelligent life. It might also be the most beautiful thing in the universe. Kethwy, Veltar said quietly. Prepare a message to the invasion fleet. What should it say, Scholar Prime? Veltar was quiet for a long moment, watching Jennifer Walsh teach Emma how to fold paper flowers from her hospital bed. Tell them to wait, he finally said. We need more time to understand what we're dealing with, because if humans truly were divine, then the Zephyrians were about to commit the greatest sin in galactic history. The power went out in New York City at exactly 7:23 on a Tuesday morning. At first, people thought it was just a normal blackout. These things happen sometimes, but then reports started coming in from other cities. Los Angeles, Chicago, Miami, London, Tokyo, Moscow. One by one, power grids around the world were failing. General Patricia Cole stood in the Emergency Command Center in Washington, D.C., watching the crisis unfold on battery-powered screens. This isn't an accident, she said grimly. Someone is doing this to us. Dr. Lisa Martinez nodded from her station. The pattern is too organized. It's like someone is testing our response to disasters. She was right. 23,000 miles above Earth, Veltar watched his plan unfold with a mixture of hope and dread. Are you certain this is necessary? Kethwy asked for the 10th time. We have to know, Veltar replied. If humans are truly selfless, they'll maintain their impossible behavior even under extreme stress. If they're like every other species, this crisis will reveal their true nature. The test was simple but terrible. Disable the power grids, crash the financial markets, create shortages of food, medicine, and clean water. Force humans to choose between helping themselves and helping others. If humans were hiding their selfishness, behind a mask of kindness, the mask would come off now. If they were truly divine, they would continue their inexplicable acts of love even when survival was at stake. Veltar had spent weeks designing this test. It was cruel, but it was the only way to know for certain what kind of species they were, dealing with before the invasion fleet arrived. He just hoped he was ready for the answer. In New York City, the blackout created instant chaos. Traffic lights stopped working. Elevators trapped people between floors. Hospital backup generators struggled to keep critical patients alive. The stock market crashed as computers went offline. But something unexpected happened in the darkness. Catherine Bell had been working on Wall Street for 15 years. She was used to thinking about money, profits, and quarterly reports. When the power failed, her first instinct was to protect her own investments and get home safely. Instead, she found herself organizing food distribution. Listen up, everyone, Catherine called out to the crowd gathered outside her office building. The grocery store on 5th Street still has food, but they can't process credit cards. I've got cash. Let's pool our resources and make sure everyone eats tonight. Within an hour, Catherine had turned her lobby into a distribution center. People brought whatever they had: cash, food, water, flashlights. Catherine kept careful track of everything, making sure families with children got extra supplies. She didn't know why she was doing this. She had never been particularly charitable before, but something about the crisis made her want to help instead of hide. Watching from space, Veltar's researchers were puzzled. Subject C-71 is exhibiting altruistic behavior despite personal risk. Her actions reduce her own resources and safety. Continue monitoring, Veltar ordered. Across the country in Los Angeles, Marcus Johnson was facing his own crisis. Marcus had grown up in the gang culture of East LA. He had spent years fighting, selling drugs, and looking out only for himself. But 5 years ago, he had changed his life. Now he worked with at-risk youth, trying to keep them out of gangs. When the power failed, old rivalries threatened to explode into violence. Gang members who had been kept peaceful by jobs and hope suddenly faced hunger and darkness. The temptation to steal and fight was overwhelming. Marcus knew he had to act fast. "Jorge," he called to a leader from a rival gang. "We need to talk." "Stay away from our territory, Marcus," Jorge warned. "This isn't about territory," Marcus said calmly. "Look around. The power's out everywhere. People are scared. Kids are hungry. We can spend the next few days fighting each other, or we can work together to help our community." It took 3 hours of careful negotiation, but Marcus managed to broker peace between 4 different gangs. Instead of fighting, they organized neighborhood watch patrols and shared resources. "My grandmother needs her medication," one gang member said. "The pharmacy on Sunset might still have some," another replied. "I know the owner. Let me talk to him." By the end of the first day, former enemies were working side by side, making sure everyone in their neighborhood had food, water, and safety. Veltar. Watch this transformation with growing amazement. Run analysis on subject M84. Analysis complete. Subject shows no signs of external coercion. Brain chemistry indicates genuine desire to help others, even former enemies. But the most significant test came in a small town in Ohio. Dr. Matthew Clark was a family physician with 2 young children. When the power crisis began, he quickly realized that his family's emergency supplies wouldn't last long. He had antibiotics, pain medication, and other medicines that could keep his children healthy if they got sick. Then his neighbor knocked on his door. "Dr. Clark?" Mrs. Rodriguez was crying. "My baby has a fever. I can't get to the hospital because of the traffic. Do you have anything that might help?" Dr. Clark looked at his own children, then at the sick baby in Mrs. Rodriguez's arms. He had enough medicine to treat one child, but not both families. The logical choice was clear. Protect his own family first. Instead, Dr. Clark gave Mrs. Rodriguez the antibiotics his own children might need. "If my kids get sick, I'll find another way," he told his wife. "But what if you can't?" she asked. "Then at least we'll know we did the right thing." This single act of selflessness broke something inside Veltar. He had been hoping the test would reveal human selfishness, prove that they were just like every other species. Instead, he was watching parents risk their own children's health to save their neighbors' babies. The pattern repeated everywhere. In Chicago, teacher Margaret Foster used her own food to feed 30 students whose parents couldn't get home from work. In Seattle, police officer Chris Anderson spent his own money buying formula for abandoned babies at an evacuation center. In Miami, elderly couple Robert and Helen Davis opened their home to 12 strangers, sharing their limited supplies with anyone who needed help. "This is impossible," Admiral Morthak said during an emergency council meeting. "No species can survive with these behavior patterns." "Yet they are surviving," Kethwe observed. "More than surviving. They're thriving through cooperation." The alien observers had expected panic, looting, and violence. Instead, they witnessed the greatest display of coordinated compassion in galactic history. But the moment that convinced Veltar of humanity's divine nature happened in a hospital in Boston. Ellen Rodriguez owned a small bakery that had been in Sear, her family for 3 generations. When the power failed, she couldn't use her electric ovens. Her business was ruined. Her life savings were invested in equipment that no longer worked. But Ellen had flour, yeast, and other ingredients. She also had a wood-burning oven in her basement that her grandfather had used during the Great Depression. Instead of hoarding these supplies for her own family, Ellen began baking bread by hand. For 18 hours straight, she kneaded dough and baked loaves in the old oven. Her hands cracked and bled from the work. Her back ached from bending over the low oven. But she kept working. When people came to her bakery looking for food, Ellen gave away every loaf for free. "I can't charge you," she told each customer. "We're all in this together." By the end of the second day, Ellen had given away over 300 loaves of bread. She had fed families, elderly people, and children. She had worked herself to exhaustion, gained nothing, and somehow seemed happier than she had ever been. "Why are you doing this?" asked a customer who had watched Ellen work for hours without rest. Ellen smiled, flour still covering her apron. "Because people are hungry, and I can bake bread. What other reason do I need?" Watching this exchange, Veltar finally understood the truth about humanity. They weren't hiding their selfishness. They weren't controlled by external forces. They weren't even consciously trying to be good. They were simply choosing love over fear again and again, even when it made no logical sense. "Kethwe," Veltar said quietly, "send a message to the invasion fleet." "What are your orders, Scholar Prime?" "Veltar, looked at the screens showing millions of humans helping each other through the artificial crisis he had created. They were scared, hungry, and facing an uncertain future. But they were facing it together, with kindness and hope. "Tell Admiral Zektar to change course," Veltar said. "We're not invading this world. Scholar Prime, we're surrendering to it." Because somewhere in the darkness of a power failure, Veltar had realized that the humans weren't the ones being tested. The test was for his own people, and they had failed it the moment they decided to create suffering just to see how others would respond. But humanity had passed a test they didn't even know they were taking, and in passing, they had taught an entire galactic empire what it truly meant to be intelligent. The invasion fleet was 3 days away from Earth when Veltar's message reached Admiral Zektar. "You want us to do what?" The Admiral's voice crackled through the communication system, distorted by distance and disbelief. "Change course," Veltar repeated. "Do not approach Earth. Scholar Prime, we have traveled for 2 years to reach this system. The Empire expects us to claim this world and its resources." "The Empire is wrong," Veltar said quietly. In the command center of the flagship, Eternal Victory, Admiral Zektar stared at his communication screen in shock. Never in the history of the Zephyrian Empire had a Scholar Prime contradicted a military order. "Veltar, explain yourself immediately." "Admiral, we are not dealing with a normal species. These humans, they may be the most advanced life forms we have ever encountered." "Advanced? Our scouts report they can barely travel to their own moon. Their weapons are primitive. Their technology is centuries behind ours. That's what makes them so dangerous," Veltar replied. Dangerous. The word hung in space between the two ships like a challenge. On the observation vessel, Veltar called his research team together for one final meeting. The chamber was filled with data displays showing human behavior patterns, psychological profiles, and sociological analysis. 2 months of intensive study had produced the most detailed examination of any species in galactic history, and none of it made sense. "Present. Your final conclusions," Veltar ordered. Kethwy stepped forward, his scaled hands trembling slightly. "Scholar Prime, we have observed 2.7 million individual acts of selfless behavior over the past 60 days. The humans call it kindness, compassion, love. We have no equivalent terms in our language. Continue. In every case, subjects chose to help others despite personal cost. They regularly sacrifice their own resources, safety, and comfort for beings who cannot repay them. This behavior appears across all age groups, social classes, and cultural backgrounds." Another researcher added, "The mathematical models are clear. A species operating on these principles should have died out within a few generations. Yet humans have not only survived but have become the dominant species on their planet. Which brings us to our conclusion," Kethwy said carefully. "We believe humans have transcended normal evolutionary development. They have achieved something we believed impossible, a species-wide commitment to collective welfare over individual survival." Veltar nodded grimly. "And what does this mean for the Empire?" "It means," Kethwy said, "that we may be in the presence of a genuinely evolved species, one that has solved the fundamental problem of intelligent life." The fundamental problem. Every species the Zephyrians had encountered faced the same challenge: how to balance individual needs with group survival. Most species solved this through rigid hierarchies, genetic programming, or social control systems. Humans had solved it through choice. They chose to be better than their instincts demanded. They chose to care for strangers. They chose love over fear, cooperation over competition, hope over despair. And they made these choices freely, every day, millions of times over. "Show me the latest observations," Veltar commanded. The screens filled with images from Earth. Even during the artificial crisis Veltar had created, humans continued their impossible behavior. There was Pete Collins, a homeless veteran who had lost both arms in war. When the power crisis began, Pete couldn't help in the usual ways. He couldn't carry supplies or help with repairs. But Pete had something else to offer. He knew the city's shelter system better than anyone. For 3 days, Pete guided lost civilians to safety. He walked miles through dark streets, leading families to food distribution centers and emergency shelters. His own shelter spot was taken while he was helping others, so Pete slept in doorways and alleys. When someone asked why he was helping when he had so little himself, Pete smiled with missing teeth. "I got nothing left to lose except my dignity," he said, "and I keep that by helping folks when I can." The screen switched to show Maria Santos, a single mother working 3 jobs to support her 2 children. When the blackout hit, Maria's neighborhood became dangerous. Gangs threatened to take control of the food distribution points, but Maria organized the other mothers. "We're not going to let anyone scare our children," she announced at a community meeting. "We'll take shifts watching the distribution center. We'll walk together when we need supplies. Nobody faces this alone." Within hours, Maria had created a network of 40 families who protected and supported each other. They shared baby formula, took turns watching children, and made sure elderly neighbors had food and medicine. Maria gained nothing from this leadership except more work and more responsibility. She already had 3 jobs and 2 children to care for, but she saw a need and filled it, the same way humans had been doing for thousands of years. But the observation that finally broke Veltar's last doubts came from a small town in Kansas. Dr. Amanda Wilson had been the town's only doctor for 12 years. When the crisis began, people flooded her small clinic with injuries and illnesses caused by the power failure. Dr. Wilson worked for 36 hours straight without sleep, treating everyone who came to her door. On the second day, her own father collapsed with chest pains. Dr. Wilson faced an impossible choice. Her waiting room was full of patients who needed immediate care. If she left to take her father to the hospital, some of them might die. But her father was having a heart attack and needed emergency treatment that only a hospital could provide. Any reasonable person would choose family first. Instead, Dr. Wilson called her father's neighbor, an elderly man named Frank, who had never driven further than the next town. "Frank, I need you to drive my father to the hospital. I can't leave my patients." "But Doc, I don't know the way to the big hospital." "I'll write down directions. You can do this, Frank." Dr. Wilson spent precious minutes writing detailed instructions and calling ahead to the hospital. She kissed her father goodbye and sent him off with a neighbor she barely knew. Then she went back to treating patients. Her father survived. Frank got him to the hospital safely and waited with him until Dr. Wilson could arrive hours later. But the alien observers were stunned by her choice. She chose strangers over her own genetic family, one researcher whispered. "Run the analysis again," Veltar ordered. Analysis confirms Subject A92 genuinely believed the needs of many patients outweighed her personal family obligations. This was the moment Veltar realized the truth that would change everything. Humans didn't just love their families. They didn't just help their neighbors. They had somehow expanded their definition of family to include everyone they met. Every stranger was a potential brother or sister. Every child was their child. Every suffering person was their responsibility. It was impossible. It was beautiful. And it was about to teach the Zephyrian Empire the greatest lesson in their history. "Kethwy," Veltar said quietly, "open a communication channel to Earth." "Scholar Prime? It's time we introduced ourselves." On Aurora 7, Dr. Lisa Martinez was running on her 4th pot of coffee when every communication system on the station began receiving the same signal. Mathematical sequences, prime numbers, geometric patterns, the universal language of intelligence trying to make contact. "Jake," she called. "They're trying to talk to us." Commander Jake Harrison rushed to the communication station. "Can you decode it?" "It's basic mathematics. They're showing us they understand our number systems." Lisa's fingers flew over the controls. "I can send a response." For the next 6 hours, Lisa and the alien intelligence exchanged increasingly complex mathematical proofs. Finally, the aliens transmitted something new. Crude images that showed humans helping each other. Then came a message that made Lisa's heart stop. The images showed the power crisis, the food shortages, the scared families. But they also showed The aliens watching, analyzing, recording everything. They caused it, Lisa whispered. The blackouts, the chaos. It was all a test. But the next images confused her. They showed alien ships changing course, moving away from Earth instead of toward it. The final image was the strangest of all. It seemed to show the alien commander bowing. Lisa stared at the screen for a long time before she understood. Jake, she said slowly, I don't think they're invading us. What do you mean? I think, Lisa paused, hardly believing her own words. I think they're surrendering. High above Earth, Veltar prepared for the most important communication in galactic history. Are you ready, Scholar Prime? Asked Kethwy. Veltar looked at the screens, showing humans rebuilding their world with kindness and cooperation. Power was being restored, but the networks of mutual aid they had created during the crisis continued to function. Neighbors who had never spoken before were now friends. Strangers who had shared food during the blackout continued to check on each other. Children who had been helped by volunteers were now volunteering to help other children. The test had revealed humanity's true nature, but it had also revealed something about the Zephyrians. They had created suffering just to satisfy their curiosity. The humans had responded to suffering with love. The aliens had responded to love with confusion. Only one of these species deserved to call itself truly intelligent. Yes, Veltar said. I'm ready. He opened the communication channel that would change two worlds forever. The message reached every radio, television, and communication device on Earth at exactly 3:47 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. People of Earth, the voice said in perfect English, somehow translating itself into every language simultaneously. We are the Zephyrian Empire. We have been watching you. In living rooms, offices, and schools around the world, humans stopped what they were doing and listened. The voice was strange but not frightening. It sounded tired, almost sad. We came to your world planning conquest. Our fleet has the power to destroy planets. Our weapons can tear holes in space itself. We have conquered 1,000 worlds and ruled over 2,000 species. President Helen Martinez sat in the White House Situation Room, surrounded by military advisors and emergency coordinators. Everyone was tense, waiting for the threat, the ultimatum, the demands for surrender. Instead, they heard something unprecedented in human history. But we cannot conquer you, the voice continued. We have studied your species for months trying to understand your nature. What we discovered has changed us forever. Your daily routines reveal something we believed impossible. You sacrifice for strangers. You love without condition. You hope without reason. You choose the welfare of others over your own survival, not occasionally, but as a pattern of life. In New York City, Catherine Bell stopped organizing her food distribution center to listen. In Los Angeles, Marcus Johnson paused his community patrol. In Ohio, Dr. Matthew Clark sat with his children, all of them staring at their radio in wonder. We do not understand how you can exist, the alien voice said. Our science cannot explain your behavior. Our computers cannot model your choices. You violate every law of evolution we know, yet you thrive. We can only conclude that you represent something beyond our comprehension, something sacred, something divine. The word divine echoed across every continent in every language through every speaker on Earth. Therefore, Veltar's voice continued, the Zephyrian Empire formally surrenders to Earth. We place ourselves under your guidance. We ask not to be your rulers, but your students. Silence fell across the planet. 7 billion humans tried to process what they had just heard. An alien empire that could destroy worlds was asking humanity to teach them how to live. Commander Jake Harrison and Dr. Lisa Martinez stared at each other aboard Aurora 7. Did that really just happen? Jake whispered. I think, Lisa said slowly, we just became the teachers instead of the students. The first human response came from an unexpected source. Billy Chen was 8 years old and lived in San Francisco with his grandmother. He was walking home from school when the alien message played on every radio and television in the city. Billy, listened carefully the way his grandmother had taught him to listen when grown-ups said important things. When the message ended, Billy did what came naturally to him. He looked up at the sky and called out, "Are you hungry? Do you need help?" His words were picked up by a news camera filming people's reactions to the alien announcement. Within hours, Billy's simple question was being broadcast around the world. Are you hungry? Do you need help? No demands for proof, no fear of alien technology, no suspicion of hidden motives, just a child's instant concern for strangers who might be in need. Watching from the observation ship, Veltar felt something he had never experienced before. His people had words for anger, fear, curiosity, and satisfaction, but they had no word for what humans called joy. "HFY," he said, quietly, "but prepare a shuttle. I want to visit their world. Scholar Prime, our protocols require—" "Forget the protocols," Veltar interrupted. "If we're going to learn from them, we need to meet them." 3 days later, the first Zephyrian shuttle landed in Central Park in New York City. Thousands of humans had gathered to witness first contact, but they kept a respectful distance when they saw how nervous the aliens appeared. Veltar was 7 feet tall with blue-green scales and large golden eyes. He moved slowly, clearly uncomfortable, in Earth's gravity and atmosphere. 2 human scientists, Dr. Martinez and Commander Harrison, approached him carefully. "Welcome to Earth," Dr. Martinez said. "Are you all right? You look tired." It was such a human response, not, "What do you want?" or "Why are you here?" but immediate concern for his well-being. "I am functioning adequately," Veltar replied, though he was obviously struggling with the environment. Within minutes, someone had brought him a chair. Someone else offered water. A street vendor tried to give him a hot dog, insisting that visitors to New York had to try the local food. Veltar accepted each gesture with growing amazement. These people had just learned that his species could destroy their world, yet they were treating him like a welcome guest who needed taking care of. But the moment that truly broke his understanding came when he met Rose Murphy. Rose was 73 years old and had lived in the same Brooklyn apartment for 40 years. She had watched the alien landing on television and immediately started cooking. "You poor thing," she said when she saw Veltar struggling with Earth's gravity. "You've come such a long way. You must be starving." Before anyone could stop her, Rose had invited the first alien visitor in human history to dinner. "Mrs. Murphy," a government official protested, "this is a matter of international security." "This is a matter of common courtesy," Rose replied, firmly. "The man traveled across space to visit us. The least we can do is feed him properly." Veltar found himself sitting at Rose's kitchen table, surrounded by the smells of home cooking and the chatter of a woman who treated him like a long-lost nephew instead of an alien conqueror. "I don't know what you people eat," Rose said, ladling soup into a bowl. "But this is good chicken soup, my grandmother's recipe. It fixes everything." Veltar tried to explain that his digestive system was different, that he couldn't process human food, that this was unnecessary. Rose ignored him and kept talking about her neighborhood, her garden, her cat who had just had kittens. "You know," she said, settling into her chair with her own bowl of soup, "my late husband Joe would have loved to meet you. He always wondered if there were people on other worlds. Guess now we know." "Are you not afraid?" Veltar asked. "Of what?" "You seem like a nice enough fellow. A little green around the gills, but that's not your fault." It was the most profound philosophical conversation of Veltar's life, and it happened over chicken soup in a tiny kitchen with a woman who treated the impossible as ordinary. That evening, as Veltar struggled to walk back to his shuttle, a street musician named Carlos Vega started playing guitar in the park. Carlos didn't know why the alien visitor looked sad, but he knew music helped when people were feeling lost. He played soft, gentle songs while Veltar sat on a park bench and watched humans walking their dogs, playing with their children, and living their impossibly kind lives. "That's beautiful," Veltar said when Carlos finished a particularly moving piece. "Music's for everyone," Carlos replied. "Doesn't matter where you're from." As Veltar's shuttle prepared to return to the observation ship, hundreds of humans had gathered in the park. But they weren't demanding anything or asking for favors. They were simply saying goodbye. the way they would to any visitor who was, leaving after a pleasant stay. Children waved. Adults called out safe travels and come back soon. Rose Murphy had packed a container of soup for his journey, insisting that even aliens needed good food when they traveled. Veltar returned to his ship carrying a container of chicken soup and a heart full of understanding he couldn't quite name. "Report, Scholar Prime," Admiral Morthak requested over the communication system. "Admiral," Veltar said slowly, "I have met the Divine, and they offered me soup. Over the following months, more Zephyrians visited Earth. They came expecting to study an inferior species, and instead found themselves students in a classroom they hadn't known existed. They learned that strength wasn't about the power to destroy, but the power to create and protect. They learned that intelligence wasn't about technological advancement, but about the wisdom to choose love over fear. Most importantly, they learned that the greatest discovery in the universe wasn't found in distant stars or advanced laboratories. It was found in the simple daily choice to treat others as more important than yourself. The Zephyrian Empire didn't disappear. Instead, it transformed. Ships that had been designed for conquest became ships of aid, bringing supplies to worlds that needed help. Warriors became teachers, conquerors became gardeners. And at the center of this transformation was humanity's impossible example. That the highest form of evolution wasn't technological or physical, but moral. The universe became a better place not because of advanced weapons or superior technology, but because one small blue planet had learned to love without limits. And in learning to love, they had taught an entire galaxy what it truly meant to be intelligent. Commander Jake Harrison and Dr. Lisa Martinez still worked on Aurora 7, but now they shared the station with Zephyrian researchers who were eager to learn about human behavior. The research had changed from studying humanity to learning from humanity. "You know what's funny?" Jake said one day as they watched Earth spinning slowly below them. "What's that?" Lisa asked. "We spent years looking for signs of intelligent life in space. Turns out the intelligent life was looking for signs of intelligence in us. And what did they find?"